Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. What is up, D Bizzle?
Hi. How we doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good, actually. I mean, yesterday was a long day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Culmination of No, it was fine. I mean, it was fine. Went through the stages of receiving information and listening to feedback.
Yeah.
And then had a good practice as we get ready for Omaha North. Had a very disappointing 1 hour stretch last night and then got back to business, man.
Right back at it?
Yeah, man, it's what we do.
It is what we do.
It's what we do. I've started to, so sleeping has been a little difficult, even though, like, one of the things I feel like with so far, and it's early at game day, and I think sleep will be the last thing to probably kick in.
Yeah, because that's always been a struggle for you.
Yeah. I mean, they're fighting like 41 years. No, my mom would say longer than that. Probably 40. I was probably sleeping as a 2-year-old, so probably 48 years of bad habits of sleeping. But like my energy is through the roof.
Yeah, dude, mine too. I have actually been able to work out more than like once a week, which is nice.
I feel like I feel
spry. I feel peppy.
Oh, people say spry. I feel like I'm not quite old enough to use that yet.
No, I use it for myself because I sometimes feel old, but I'm feeling spry again. You know,
I'm good. So what else? Yeah, that's about it. I always have to remind myself I need boundaries. As an empath, I'm very, 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 very poor with boundaries. So
you're really bad at telling people no.
So I'm very accessible, and sometimes I should just move on. Right. So that might be my 2-month New Year's resolution.
Actually, just wait like 6 weeks. Start it.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I talked to a couple of people last night. Well,
there's a lot going on yesterday.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I remember I had this conversation with Lance. This was probably 2011, maybe. And this was in regards to kids, but it's kind of more my life philosophy. It's you can't save them all. Some people are just some people just like to operate in, like, I'm reading some of these DMs last night, and I'm like, wow, like that was your takeaway from this coaching move. Like it's just interesting.
Oh, what was the takeaway?
Yeah, I don't really want to get into it, but it was so.
Because I'm just curious because
there were a lot. There's lots of
wide spectrum.
A lot. Like I could read probably 12 in a row, and I bet you 9 of them are different.
Yeah.
No, probably 7 of them are different. I've got everything from Rhule messed this up. This was his get out of jail free card. We all know what comes next if and when this doesn't work out. I can't function around people like that.
What comes? I don't even know what that means.
I'm gonna move on from that.
Because I don't know what comes next.
What? Yeah, me neither. My boy Troy, he was like, "Man, if you knew what was coming this morning, you should work for the feds if you kept that a secret." I did not.
I don't think anybody knew that was coming.
Not
really. Not that.
I don't even know. So I think I take him at his word, and I'll do some speculating this morning, but I'm gonna take him at his word that, because I kind of know how he thinks, right? Remember when I told you it would kind of bug him sometimes when people would try to predict his move or tell him what to do, because even he didn't know.
Yeah, and he said that.
And I was like, I don't know if I admire that or I'm scared, because I like to be calculated. Now, Lord knows, anybody that's around me, like my staff thinks I'm crazy. Most people that can you imagine what those guys were thinking yesterday at the foaling place?
Yeah.
They had to be like, this dude's off his rocker. But it's like I sometimes I'm so rigid. That like when I go, I like all the way go.
Yeah.
Right? Just
gotta loosen up a little bit.
It's like a child. And it was a big playground. So I was like, I'm going to play.
It was pretty fun.
Yeah, man.
It was pretty cool.
You think I'm not going to be there?
Yeah.
We'll get to that later. That
was fun. That's a cool place.
Dude, I was throwing like 90 mile an hour
You were
heaters with that thing.
You were
I was
getting
like,
after
let's
it.
go. It's just like open space. And
It
you know
is.
I'm a child. So I'm like, run.
Yeah.
Isn't that what kids would do?
Yeah.
Just run. No, but I'm like, so then I started thinking, I'm like, what's the difference between like self-awareness and my thing's going crazy. I'm sorry. Being like reactionary.
Mm.
Because he said some things yesterday, and I go all the way back to when I felt like, because somebody asked me when I felt this coming. And you know when I felt like this was really coming? When I would hear coordinators defend themselves
publicly
to the media.
Yeah.
And remember I said, no,
you can't go back and get that.
I said, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like just stay the course. Don't do that.
Because it's really hard not to let that impact your decisions moving forward.
I've listen, this isn't revisionist history. Because I've talked about this all the time. Yeah. I'm like, so what you're going to do is
you're going to overdo it. You're going to overcorrect.
You're going to overcorrect.
Yeah.
You're going to overcorrect because you just get to know people's personality traits.
Well, and that's human nature too.
It depends on your level of security.
Yeah, you have to be really
This
really
job
secure.
is very difficult, right? So
it can make you very insecure.
Yeah, in a hurry.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh shoot, we're 5-1.
Yeah.
And you're saying,
feel like you have to defend yourself.
You're defending yourself. You're 5-2, and it's like, well, we can score in the fourth. We can. I'm like, oh gosh,
that you can't go back and get.
I'm like, oh gosh, I've seen this before. I like
because you think like Scott Frost wasn't a confident guy coming in here.
Yeah, he was
supremely.
And he'll I know too much, right?
He got on top of him and hurt.
And I love to study. I love to study personality traits. So I just racked up. I mean, you working around enough Noddles or Candace Gregory's or some just dynamic people, whether with even the flaws. Like Alan Murrow is a guy I talk about all the time. Where I just watched his personality traits, and I'm like, okay, I can see this happen. I just like doing that stuff, right? So I'm watching all this unfold. That's how I built the head coach that I want through the lab. Remember, I said,
"Yep,
I want you to be like this. I want you to be like this. I want you to be like this. I want you to be like this, because this is what this place does." And so when I heard that, I was like, oh boy.
And it's not for everybody. Being here is not for everybody.
And then I listened to the presser yesterday, and I'm like, all right, my man used the word reactionary, which made me think, what did I tell you? And I knew nothing, nothing, not a goddamn thing, except for he was being very observant, especially Monday, Tuesday.
Rhule was.
Coach Holgerson.
Okay.
Got an inkling of kind of what was going on at practice Wednesday and the Thursday, and I'm like, oh shoot, I wonder if this is like just feeling this out. Clearly, I'm taking him at his word that that's what this was. Like I think Dana had to come and see, like, okay, what kind of command do I have? Could I do this? Do I like what I'm seeing? Is there enough here to put my name on it? All that type of stuff. So I don't think he knew anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Also, I also don't think Coach Rhule, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, this is what was intended when he brought him in. Like, I take him at his word, too, that I don't think this was the intention when he brought Holgerson in at this point.
I don't either.
Because it would have been.
You know what I think happened?
What's that?
I'm dead serious. So
because it would have been really hard to bring somebody in and be like, hey, you're going to call plays in 2 weeks.
This is total speculation.
Yeah.
So I think I go back and I listen to all the things that Coach Rhule said about this job. His OC, his DC, what he likes, what he doesn't like. And the whole surgeon comment, right? Like,
he's doing surgery on a train.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're complaining about the stitches and this, that, and the other. And how you talked about Coach Satterfield's loyalty and work ethic. My gut says, because everybody's like, oh, man, this is on Coach. Not everybody. I don't want to exaggerate. Some people are like, oh, man, this is on Coach Rhule. This is on his head. And, well, you just heard one of the comments, right? Like, this is what I think happened. Just because I think, generally speaking, Coach Rhule cheers for people, and he champions them in a very transactional world. I could see a situation in which Coach Sack gave him everything he had last year.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very, very difficult job.
Mm-hmm.
And this year he's like, okay, I told you privately, these are kind of my concerns. This has been our history because they go in spurts together.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be together for a couple of years, and then, you know, Coach Sack, when he first got here, said, you know, every now and again we got to reconnect. We're good for each other.
Mm-hmm. Don't want to be away from each other for too long.
Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So those are things that I know in my head that I think can sometimes impact decisions. So I think so he's like, okay, we got good talent. I like, contrary to popular belief, I like the young wide receiver group. I think we're going to be good enough up front. We finally got a quarterback that I think can really play.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give him a chance to see what happens.
You want to give him a chance to flourish
with better ingredients. I at least owe him that. Mm-hmm. He hung in there with me
through a really rough situation.
His daughter went back to school. Like, there's just a lot going on, right? So I feel like the human component says,
let's give him a chance.
Let's give this a chance.
Yeah.
But Coach Rhule at his core is competitive, right? Like, I said this. That's the type of person that can leave you, tell you he cares about you, walk out of your life, and you're like, I thought you said you cared.
Yeah.
Like, he's just built like that. So once he said he's willing to do whatever it takes, and I said, man, he's letting you know. Like,
yeah, he's not kidding.
He'll do whatever it takes.
He said it again yesterday.
Because of his three components, right? He's self-aware, he's other-centered, and he's competitive. Whatever order you want to put those in. It's no guarantee that that's going to work. But if you have those three components,
you got a chance.
You're always going to give yourself a chance. You're always going to be in the game if you possess those three things. So when I go back and I listen and I heard him say about Coach Holgerson, now let me go back to what I said I liked about him coaching at Houston and West Virginia. What I say about those jobs?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
He said those jobs came. It was weird scenarios in which he was coaching.
Yeah.
I said he can coach under chaos.
Yeah, especially that West Virginia situation was super weird off the bat.
How can you not handle Cam Ward?
Yeah.
At Houston, right? It's like he can. There's just something about his personality where he's not reactionary. When Coach Rhule said that yesterday, I'm like, I got it. He had some of the same verbiages around Coach Cooper's departure. Whatever this decision entails. Sometimes this place, it takes a certain temperament to thrive. He's looking for it in his players. He's looking for it in his coaches. He's looking for it in his staff. And he's gone as far as to look for it in himself.
Yeah, 100%.
Don't kid yourself.
That's that self-awareness right there.
That's okay.
And that's, I mean, I used to talk about this all the time when Frost was here. I thought there was a startling lack of self-awareness.
Yeah. So
for him to be able to turn it around at this job.
So like self-awareness is like the being conscious of your own emotions, how you kind of react. And what that leads to in terms of your choices for reactions.
Yes.
Right? Like that's that self-evaluation. Reactionary is responding to like a stimuli.
I consider it knee-jerk.
Without thinking.
Yeah, I call it knee-jerk.
Okay, so that's kind of
it's responding to something without going through the process of kind of understanding why you're responding that way.
Right. I told you this. The scary thing about me is I can think of consequences all the way through
and then do it anyway
and still make a bad decision.
Yeah.
Because I'll have somehow convinced myself, you know what? The results be with it what it may. At least it's not going to. At least it's
I can eat it. I can eat those.
I can eat it. It's not going to sneak up on me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I like secretly like admire that or.
I would say it can be a good or bad thing, honestly.
Oh, come on now. It definitely can be a good or bad thing.
Yeah. Like there's
when I'm destructive, it's horrible.
Right, but there are good scenarios where it's like I can see the consequences to the end.
Yeah.
You're like, I can live with that.
I've thought this through. It's not. I'm gonna know how to handle
and
it.
even if it doesn't go my way, I can live with it.
Yeah, like that's
because that can be a hugely positive thing.
100%. I think so. I'm going back to like how he's putting these things together, and I'm like, I wonder how hard it must have been for him to ask for help, because if there's one thing men can't do, it's ask for help.
Not a lot. Yeah, it's hard.
Not as natural born alphas.
Yeah.
And he's clearly a natural born alpha.
I do wonder, like, at what point, though, does the competitiveness bring it back around?
Well, that's where self-awareness comes in.
Because you've got the, hey, I'm kind of an alpha. I kind of do, like, I don't necessarily want to ask for help. I don't want to have to ask for help.
What do you think the situation was in December and January with Holgerson? And then it just disappeared, and then you got to go back and get it.
So I think that's the part. I think that's the part with Satterfield you were talking about. Because I'm guessing.
Or a combination of both.
Yeah. Because I'm guessing. I mean, this is, again, 100% speculation here. I'm guessing Holgerson wanted more of a role and a say, because head coach, probably an alpha as well, wanted more of a role and a say than Coach Rhule wanted to give at the time, because of the thing we were talking about with Satterfield. He wanted to give Sat a chance.
Yeah.
Right? But here's the thing, and I'm glad you brought up the surgeon analogy again. Because, and I don't know if Rhule was thinking about it this deeply at the time.
I'm sure
he probably was.
I'm sure he was, because remember they have past history.
Yeah, but listen, there's different types of surgeons, right? There's trauma surgeons that are really good in chaotic ER situations. You come in, you stop the bleeding, you make sure a guy survives, then you turf him somewhere else, right? And then you've got kind of your like neurosurgeons, the guys that are real specific. They're doing these super fine movements. They probably wouldn't do great in a trauma situation, and trauma surgeons wouldn't always do well in a neurosurgeon situation. That's just whatever. That's the first one I thought of. I don't know if that's the best analogy, but they're two different skill sets, right? And I think Coach Rhule want to be like, hey, I want to give him a chance to be in a situation where the world isn't falling around him and see how he does. And maybe Satterfield's a guy that needs the chaos to thrive.
And I think I'm with you. And I think one of the reasons that kept pushing my buttons through that stretch where we were 5-1, where we were just breaking down every win, is I think in my subconscious I was terrified that we needed more to sustain during tough times than we were willing to give.
Sure.
Like I felt like we needed, this is a terrible analogy, but I remember this real time. This is why I was so defiant. Even though I could see some flaws, I'm like, okay, just give us enough cushion of support. Just provide enough cushion of support so if we fall, it won't hurt as bad. Well, you're already stressed. It's high revved. You're defending your record. You're defending your style of play. Like you wasted tension. So you didn't have enough in reserve when it actually
when you needed it.
When it like really hit the fan.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So you had used up all your reserves.
Yeah. You burned through the reserve fuel.
And so that was the part that not that it's wrong. I felt like it was unnecessary at the time.
Yeah, I think unnecessary is a good word.
So I'm like, fudge. All right. And this isn't about likes or disliking. It's about wanting the best going forward. Because in my head, I'm thinking they just don't have enough resolve to just be getting by emotionally.
Yeah. So
let's control the things that we can control.
You talking about the players?
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's rally and know that there's that goodwill.
And try and lift them up a little bit.
And lift them up.
Yeah.
So then when they really got to tap into the reserves, they got a little extra. There. They're not already spent.
Because they're defending their record.
Because the first time they shot their shot and got their teeth kicked in, it was like, I mean, everybody scattered.
Yeah.
Right? So, he kept saying, how do I get through? How do I get them through this? I got to push them through it. I got to push them through it.
Yeah.
I got to push them through it. So now you're to the point where you got to figure out who wants to be pushed, who's going to come out the other side.
So that's the $1 million question.
It is the $1 million question because I don't know. So there's two things I probably know for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know long-term ramifications on Dana. I don't know immediate impact statistically. But there's two things that I know for sure. Number one, in an almost last-ditch effort to instill confidence in the players, he's going to give this one more shot to the players. Hey, listen.
To the older guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, listen. I've given you everything you needed to succeed.
Yep.
Some of you were feeling this way and that way. Now this is it. After this, it's put up or shut up time. You are out. I have exhausted all options
to give you an opportunity to be successful.
Which is, and listen, right or wrong, because it burns me. Who's that sound like? That is exactly my personality.
Yeah.
I'll give you almost every option to kick my teeth in. But the threat,
once you get to a point,
it's over.
Yeah.
In there is zero coming back.
Yeah.
So
if you're a guy in that locker room and you're having a hard time with the competitive endurance necessary to be a part of Coach Rhule's program, if you're having a hard time doing the things that are necessary, you're having a hard time being mentally tough enough to overcome some of the things that are happening, and you look and he goes, hey, this is a place, this is the caring, not coddling, right? Cares about you, wants to give you every opportunity to succeed, but you can't save everybody.
Yep.
Well, you just said, right?
Yeah.
You cannot save everybody. And so it's like, hey, I've done everything I can do. I even went so far as to get rid of a guy.
Get way out of my comfort zone.
Get way out of my comfort zone to, I mean, let's be honest here. Do something that is fairly publicly embarrassing to a guy I really care about.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if I'm willing to do that, I need you to be willing to do everything I'm asking of you. Yeah. Because nothing I'm asking of you is going to hurt somebody you care about more than what I just did to Marcus Satterfield, right? That's why he made sure to talk about Marcus Satterfield's character in that moment as well.
And I think that was the whole.
So what I think is the result of this is, hey, if you guys aren't built this way, this place isn't going to be for you.
Yep.
I've given you – there's no more excuses.
Yep. And I'll give you where I think Sat pays immediate dividends with regards to what you just said.
We'll get to that, and we'll set up the show coming up next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Let's get to our guy out of breath, Brian, before we hop back into this conversation. Brian, what's going on, bud? Brian, how are you?
I'm all right, fellas. How y'all doing?
I'm good, B. What is going on, buddy?
Then I thought about starting off my call by saying, Satterfield, he can go anywhere. He can go anywhere. But the players, that's what I'm worried about.
That's fair. Listen, you're not alone. You're not alone.
That's a shout out to Michael Parsons right there. Anyway,
he couldn't even go back and get it on his pod. He made it even worse. He made it.
Hey, I told you what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for 2 coins on somebody's eyes up in one of them boots. After we get blown out by 80 points.
You want to get across the bridge? Who's got the ferry?
Gotta get across the river Styx, brother.
You got rid of the Stetson, man. I've been waiting on it for a long time. That Herschel Walker trade gave you a little bit of time in my lifetime, but you use all your currency, Jerry. It's time to go. You looking bad at somebody. You looking bad at somebody that was on a presidential stage who bowed out of a race after a performance. That's all I'm gonna say. That's it.
What do you got for me?
I like the decision. I just think that it's been an ongoing. He's been talking to Holgerson the entire season. That's what I think. I don't think it's something that just is that as much fly by the seat of the pants as it may appear. I just think he just finally just said, hey, this week he just made his final decision to say, hey, come on in. I've seen enough. Which I'm very happy with. I still wonder. I ask myself a question. Usually, I do a lot of degenerate stuff. look at streaks, and people usually are what their streaks or records are. Maybe this team, some people from a certain coach just only got 5 wins in them. We're going to see.
Yeah.
We're going to see. I hope not, but I've been wondering that, and I know there's been some talk from younger players from what I'm hearing, rumors that you're not too happy with their playing time because more likely they want to win. They're competitive, and they probably think they can assist, but I see some things down there. I kind of am ready for next year because I kind of am getting tired of watching certain people on this team. I think we got all we can get out of them. That's personally what I feel. But hey, good luck.
Appreciate it, Big
Ryan, appreciate the call.
Again, he's not alone.
No, yeah, I mean, we talked about this with the players, and I think I brought up like there's a part of me that wonders if there's some stuff you just can't get out of your DNA at a certain point.
I tell you, the hard part was 3 weeks ago after Indiana.
Yeah,
he had to figure out, and that's why he's paid the big bucks. He had to figure out. I still have some goals in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
What comes across is panic.
Yeah.
Versus I got to give myself the best chance to reach some of these goals.
100%.
And I know you wanted to say something, but I want to get to Doug's question and where I tell you I think Holgerson pays immediate dividends based on Brian, or you want to go?
No, go ahead.
So with regards, one of the places I think Coach Holgerson pays immediate dividends is the whole blank slate thing.
Mm.
Right? You come in, you've had a chance to evaluate. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You get to watch as much as you want. You can go back as far as you want. You can look at sequential play calling. You can look at, they have these real fancy things where you can pattern plays.
Mm-hmm.
You can group them accordingly. You can watch them all.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Because you spend a handful of days here without saying a word to anybody. You just study and take it in info.
Yeah.
So then you come back and you say, you're excuse me, you're having this conversation probably. This is hypothetical. This part is hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're saying, oh, I like this concept. Do you have this kind of player? Well, yeah, this kind of player is here. He looks like this. This is number this.
Mm-hmm.
Or we kind of have this guy. He's on the bench.
Yeah.
He's like this.
But he can do X, Y, and Z.
And we have another guy. He's redshirting. He can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So you go through all of that. And somebody without any pre-existing notion, people that have run businesses see this all the time.
I mean, teachers do this all the time.
Right? Okay. So you come in and you blank slate this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the players will be re-engaged with a sense of purpose because I feel like practice will get back to mattering again.
Mm.
Now, hear my heart.
Because they got to prove it.
There's this whole, well, what were they doing before? Keep in mind, this was at the time, this was still a 5-win team. So while you're critiquing, you're not panicking, making wholesale changes because how would we have explained that to you? How would they have explained that to you guys?
Yeah. Like
right?
all of a sudden,
because they were going to be darn if they do, darn if they don't. So yeah. I'm gonna let that part go of the grading of emotions. Because let's just assume that wanting it both ways, or being fickle, or even being rash, like all of that's part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's over there. That's part of the deal. That's fan base. That's media. Okay, that like you're gonna have some good, some bad, some people in the middle, some people over the top. That's a given. So what the players got to figure out is, all right, I'm watching this process unfold. I've been doing this for so long, whether it's a long time or a short time.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're in the process, and you're like, ooh, I think this could yield the results I want it to. Or you're thinking, I don't know. And there's no telling which one of those it is. Because not everybody's going to be like, oh, man, this is for me.
Right.
Some will say, I'll give it a try, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Some people are going to say, man, sign me up. I don't care what we got to do. Like everybody's coached that player where I just said this about one of our guys the other day. I'm suggesting a bigger picture move. And one of my coaches is like, I don't know. And I'm like, listen, this is the type of person that if you told him to go down to 120th and Pacific and touch the stop sign and come back, you're going to be a better player. He's not going to ask any questions. He's going to run down there and touch the stop sign. And so there are some players like that.
Yeah.
There are also players that are just skeptics by nature because of past history.
Yeah.
What a new set of eyes does is it doesn't care.
So what can you do?
It absolutely doesn't care. There is no, well, such and such has come so far. He's a 7 now. He used to be a 4. We're making progress. Or this guy was a 10. Now he's a 6. But it doesn't care. A new set of eyes just gets to come in and evaluate. So I think the players will be if you're engaged, you are engaged even more. If you're on the fence, you're re-engaged. And if you are out, I'm telling you, it's not going to be for you.
Yeah.
Because you already have your habits. The other thing is, it's what I said about Indiana, and I'm telling you, if it would have been snow or some ice, I would have done cookies in a raggedy Atlas out there, right? It's not even built to do cookies. But when he said, let's do simple well, I don't care if I said.
How many times did you say that in the press conference yesterday?
Power, counter, gap, whatever it is. Just find new ways to get there. You only need four pet plays. Talk about pet plays. So what does Indiana do almost on every offensive sequence? Inside run threat, an outside stressor, vertical run threat.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the staple of their RPO offense. They just do it over and over and over again. Watch Michigan's run game last year. Same plays. 2 different blocking schemes, they'd get there the same way. They just did it over and over and over really well. I don't care if it's LSU and you throw it around the yard and it's Chase and Jefferson. They do it over and over and over. So I don't care what it is. When you can master the simple, you can just play fast. And he said, when he said, find the most competitive guys and just turn them loose.
Yep.
That's life 101. That's life 101. I don't care if it's I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
You're going to give yourself a chance.
I think this was as much a call to the players as much as it was
He
anything.
reiterated it.
And we'll get to that and plenty more here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. Lots of really good comments in the YouTube channel. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to kind of touch on that part with Marcus Satterfield, right? Because, we were talking about in the first segment how, we kind of felt like it was getting away from him a little bit with having to defend him or feeling like he had to defend himself when they're 5-1 and they're winning. And then it takes we always talk about with the head coach. We don't talk about this a lot with assistants. We don't talk about it a lot with players, right? But at a job of this profile, the assistants have to be built a certain way for it and the players have to be built a certain way for it. Yeah. And frankly, to another degree, I kind of think the media has to be built a certain way for it, and the fans have to be built a certain way for it. And we don't focus on a lot of those, right, outside of the head coach. Because, when we're talking about Satterfield, we go, hey, that's I know you in the moment, we're going, oh, man, I really wish he didn't feel like he had to do this. Because it takes I
said that out loud.
On air.
After he said it.
On air. I remember you doing it. And I remember not totally understanding why in the moment. I was like, yeah, it's not really that big of a deal. But then here's the problem, right? It's almost impossible, not impossible, but it's almost impossible to be secure enough in yourself to defend yourself and then not have it change your behavior.
Yeah.
That is almost impossible. And the reason I brought up media is because it kind of happens to us sometimes too, where we're sitting here and we go, hey, whether you've got a take that people think is kind of out there or, people are just, the Satterfield thing is a great example. Just the way we're sitting here is like, hey, they're doing some good things on offense, right? We don't necessarily like the results. The execution's not where we want it to be. So, anybody who was defending Satterfield at some point started getting a ton of comments and slings and arrows and the whole thing thrown at him. And it's really easy in that moment if you sit in this job and you go to be like, hey, you're right. He sucks. I was dead wrong, whatever. It's like, listen, the results can be what they are, and you can still say, hey, there were some things here that definitely could have worked, right? And so it's hard to sit there in the moment, and this is obviously much less pressure job than the offensive coordinator and play caller at the University of Nebraska. So if it can affect us in that moment, I can only imagine the level of effect it can have on a guy in that position.
Yeah, I'm vibing with you. I think for like the takeaways that I think are pertinent. You talked about life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's still some life lessons. That's kind of like he's talking. He's like plucking my heartstrings,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where I'm thinking, oh man, this guy doesn't treat you right, or he says this to you, or he's, you only like, you could hate the whole sandwich, but if they have a good piece of cheese, like you think it's a good sandwich.
Yeah.
So part of the reason that I'm going to ride with Coach Rhule
mm-hmm.
is because from a humanitarian standpoint, I think the better people are, the better I'm going to be,
mm-hmm.
right? And the better they're going to be. So at the end game is always that. No matter how crazy sometimes fans talk to me about, or how disillusioned I think they are, or how disillusioned they think I am,
mm-hmm.
there's always going to be this component in me that's like, all right, how do we get better?
Yeah.
Right? So my cutoff is not good. I see that a little bit in Coach Rhule too, which is maybe what I gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt him to the core to say what he said about Seth.
Yeah.
Right? You can just tell.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You just look at his mannerisms. He's like, he's a good man.
Mm-hmm.
He is. It's what I always said. It's like people confuse my affinity for Coach Sat with me critiquing his production. And I have to be careful because this isn't about defending me. But what I'm saying is when you're in this job
mm-hmm.
and it's a multi-million-dollar job and people want to make it just about money and results, if you want to function for any course of time, hear my heart here. If you want to function at this job for any period of time, any length,
mm-hmm. and
have any sort of health to you, it has to be about things other than that.
Mm.
I get the results-oriented business.
Yeah.
I do. Got to win. Got to win. You got. There's wins and losses, man, and you got to pay, and you're paid well to generate those results.
Mm-hmm.
But as the individual, and the individuals that are in it,
mm-hmm.
you do not. Or I don't even want to tell you how to think. As a fan base or media or parents that have those kids, you do not want your coaches and players thinking that way.
Mm.
Do we?
I don't know.
Do you want your coach thinking just about how much money he or she makes?
No.
You don't.
Not at all.
Do you want your player or your kids being coached by somebody that just cares about the money and winning and losing?
No. No. I mean, no.
That's just, I'm talking for everybody out there.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, when it gets to be nut-cutting time,
what's the first thing
and we want to critique, and they need to do, that's all we talk about.
Oh, he's making $1.4 million as a coordinator.
Be better.
Making $7 million as a head coach.
You're going to pay a guy $1.4 million just to coach tight ends? Who cares? It's not your money.
Yeah.
Like, it has, if you want any sort of longevity for people that do a job that you like, you better hope they make it about something other than money and winning and losing. And sometimes the fine line is, how much should I care about what else motivates me in this job other than winning and losing? What else motivates me in this job other than winning and losing? I'm going to land the plane in your guys' goddamn living room. Everybody always says, oh, I could be a lot less miserable with money than without. Mm-hmm. The question you guys never ask yourself is, how long would it take? Mm. How long would it take?
To become that miserable with the money?
Yeah. It has a shelf life, too.
Yeah, shorter than you think.
Whatever it is.
Shorter than you think.
It has a shelf life too.
Yeah.
And so when you're trying to cheer and root people on that have other people's lives in their hands, I'm just asking that you hope that it comes down to something other than money, and don't be double-minded when you want to grade it. Right? So you have a guy, and it doesn't mean he's without fault, because clearly Coach Rhule has to eat some of this, and he knows it. He knows it. So he's got to go back and he's got to flush it. He's like, man, I talk about Nodal all the time. He told me, he said, 75% of the time when you think about whether you have to get rid of somebody or not, it's too late.
Yeah.
Think that's not true?
No, it probably is.
Probably is, right?
It probably is.
Guess what? Guess where the variance is in that statistic?
What's that?
Human emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if all of us were so good at balancing it, can you just imagine?
Be a lot easier.
Yeah, be like living in some utopia, right?
Well, and you just brought up the one thing that the money can't change. It can't fix. It's human emotion.
Right. So Coach Holgerson's got to come in, and he's got to kind of get this lay of the land and to kind of understand. But I always talk about balancing like my weaknesses and my strengths with people I want to be surrounded by. Coach Rhule needs to be around somebody that isn't as much of an empath as he is.
A little more straight to the point.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that he hired Coach Butler. What you have to decide in the duration is how much is too much of overcorrecting.
Because you want to balance on the staff, right?
That's part of his job too, right?
Yes.
So he's got to be critiquing that the whole time. And so while it's easy to say, man, he makes $9 million, I'm just telling you, it's interesting how you don't want somebody to be like that, but when it comes time to critique them, that's your end-all, be-all. It's crazy, man. We want this guy to be like, yep, you guys always put together these dream teams in the offseason of who I should bring in with my pool of monies, and we do all these mock drafts to pick if you could have anybody, you get a guy that's fairly proven. He's a 12-13% upgrade as a play caller.
Yeah.
He's won a lot of different places, and the best thing that we can come up with sometimes is, man, this guy made a mess. Yeah, he knows he did.
Yeah.
And it's up to him to clean it up. Now you just have to give him the opportunity to do it. But the immediate dividends will be, you know what? I'm self-aware enough to know where I need to get better. Now let's give this a chance in the short term. I'm not married to it. Let's just see.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, reminding you that if you're driving to work, make sure you've got your seatbelt fastened. It can prevent injuries and save lives, but only if worn properly. Make it click. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. If you want to give us a call, we've got some time throughout the show today, 888-638-4876. But I wanted to get back into something, because we've talked a lot about the emotional, psychological, all of that stuff with this move. And you said something in that vein that got my wheels turning a little bit in that last segment, which it's hard to do because I'm a little slow sometimes. But you were talking about, and I think this is where we have a hard time with balancing these things. You want a guy that isn't just results oriented, right? You want a guy that doesn't only care about the wins and losses. You want a guy that cares about the people, that cares about the state, that cares about the program, that cares about the kids within his program, right? But you also want a guy that's highly competitive. That's a super hard line to walk. I think
sometimes they're mutually exclusive.
They can be,
but they don't
have to be.
Oftentimes they don't have to be.
But that can be, I think, in people's minds, I think those can be contrasting things. Because a lot of times when we talk about people that don't care about the results, or not that they don't care about the results, but are focused on process over results, a lot of times we kind of think of it as like, that's an excuse when you're not winning yet, right? I think that, especially here, because we hear it all the time, right? Oh, just trust the process, whatever, trust the process. And we haven't won much. right? So it's hard to trust the process when the process never brings the result that you're looking for. And so it's like, okay, are you just not competitive, or is the process flawed? Like, to me, that's a really tricky line to walk, to be highly process oriented and highly competitive.
Okay, so what were the criticisms of Coach Rhule when he took the job and as he's doing the job, right? It was basically the hires.
Yeah, a lot of it.
What else am I missing?
The only other thing that I heard any sort of frequency on was the record against ranked teams.
Okay. All right. So let's just start with, because this is on the fly. I mean, we're here. We might as well talk about it. So we got the whole Buddy Hire thing, and I used to say, man, you guys with these Cosgrove examples, I said, that's not who he is. Like, It hasn't even been long enough yet.
Yeah.
That's not revisionist history.
No,
those are things I said, right?
Yeah, said in real time.
So he got rid of, and how it played out is I'm not exactly sure on all the details, but obviously his best friend on the coaching staff is gone. Okay. He got rid of CJ Cavazos. He got rid of Omar. Omar was a guy that he had let go twice at previous other stops. Hired him back. Why? Well, because I think a lot of it has to do with my thought process on Coach Satterfield. Like, I've asked him to perform with a lot less.
Let's see what he can do with more.
Let's see what he can do with more. At least for my own well-being, I'll know if I've given it everything I've got.
We don't even talk about Bob Wager.
I don't disagree with that at all. Right? Like, because I'm not saying it's right. Some people are very different. You have a much shorter fuse than I do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're wait. I'm going to almost exhaust every option to make sure before I discard you, I want to make sure, and believe me, I waste a lot of time, a lot of money. It's not always good.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying be like me.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I can relate.
You give people a way longer leash than I do.
So, he's got to get rid of some guys. Constantly pruning the process. Quietly, he turned over that recruiting department like we wouldn't believe. Brings in some analysts, brings in some more analysts, brings in some more analysts. Then there's this albatross, right? It's Coach Sat. So he gives Sat every chance to succeed, right? I finally got this high school quarterback. He's a good player. We got good skill guys. We got a mature offensive line. Let's just see. So we got to the point where that's not going to work either. Why? Why do we think that that's a sign of anything other than, does it show self-awareness?
Yeah, I think so.
In what way?
I think he looks at
Just pick one.
Yeah, he looks at it and says, hey, this thing that I wanted to work isn't working. We got to change course.
Okay. What about with himself personally?
Himself personally probably looks at it and says, hey, I thought I could get more out of this guy, putting him in a better situation.
What about globally? Like, not just Satterfield.
I think you look at it and say, hey, maybe I give people too many opportunities sometimes.
Or I thought I had this kind of figured out.
Yeah.
Or
like, hey, the thing that I did at Temple and Baylor, I maybe have to change a little bit for it to work at Nebraska. This is a different job.
So you would agree that shows self-awareness?
Yes.
All right, let's go to being other-centered. What you got any examples of him being other-centered?
I mean, you have countless examples of him being other-centered. If you want to look at
that, goes without saying, right?
Yeah, that's a given.
Okay, how about his competitiveness?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably the most competitive guy in that room at any given time.
Yeah,
including the players.
He had exhausted all options.
Yeah.
To keep Coop till he had to go. He
exhausted all options with Satterfield until he had to go.
Yep. Got rid of Wager. Had to keep his son. You have to have hard conversations with. You got a guy that coaches in Texas Tech. You got his son here that you think's got a lot of good potential. He's probably had to learn some hard lessons along the way, right?
And he may or may you're probably looking at Garrett right now, and at some point going to have to make a decision whether or not he can cut it at the spot too, which is going to be a really hard conversation.
Is that competitive?
100%.
How about this one though? How about bringing a guy in that wanted some, maybe, I say wanted as if I know. Maybe he the speculation is, well, Dana probably wanted this, and this at this time. Coach Rhule wasn't willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's got to come back. You got to come back to him
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey,
Which, again, self-awareness.
how about now?
Yeah.
Like, just take a look. See if this is something you could do.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it was like to kind of wait through that process for a guy to give you the yay or nay, and you're kind of at his mercy?
Yeah, it's humbling.
Yeah. So almost 99.9% of the time, I'll take those attributes if I think I want something to have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I clearly love the university, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to exhaust all options to give that a chance. What I'm interested in is why we make, because I think anytime something goes wrong or doesn't go the way we like, I say this all the time. I say, yeah, you know what? What could I have done differently to change the outcome? Like, what could I have done differently?
Mm-hmm.
Should I have said this? Should I have not said that? Should I have acted like this? Should I have waited till I didn't have 19 cocktails or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
But it's not because that's where you kind of have to
You take inventory.
start.
Yeah.
We know we don't want people overseeing something and make it just about money and results.
Mm-hmm. Especially something we care about emotionally.
How many times have we critiqued the portal? Not liking pay for play.
Countless times.
You know, you turn over a roster and got a bunch of mercenaries. And that would be somebody that was just invested in trying to garner results, right? Right?
Yeah, and we don't like that.
We
very clearly do not like that.
We clearly do not like that. If he wasn't a representative, like let's say Bill Callahan, of the state's wants and needs and kind of what we are at our core, we clearly didn't like that.
Not at all.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes time to defend our thought process, it's you're paid X amount of money to make those decisions.
And to win games.
I'm like, man, must be nice to be afforded that luxury.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are these there are these human components involved that we don't, and some coaches can't handle it. They quit. Because the world is becoming more we just saw Coach Farley step down at UNI. Go back and listen to his press conference. Some will say, oh, man, he's just getting soft. Man, you got to roll with the times. Others are going to say, man, love his conviction. Just old school.
Well, and especially at a place like UNI, like that, this world is a lot tougher in certain jobs than it is at others, like the current climate.
Yeah. No, I know.
Right?
Yeah,
like
I know.
That's...
I'm just... So I guess I say all this to say, like, if you're really if you really want what's best for Nebraska, and this isn't necessarily media specific, because media's got a job to do, and they just gotta, he or she's just gotta do their job.
Yeah.
I just think it's very hard to have intellectual or football conversations or sports conversations daily if the goalposts change on what your benchmarks are.
Yeah, that's why
it's very hard to like have any sort of healthy diet. I talk about this with former players all the time, right? Some, I'm not even gonna get into that, but you know, some you could just tell have just different goals.
That's why self-awareness is important for fans and media too, right?
Yeah, but I can't. So
now we don't get to decide that.
Yeah,
but listen, if you're talking about if your interest is in having a healthy dialogue, right, then both parties have to be self-aware, because a lot of times what we interact with is go ahead.
So I say all that to say, like, you need a coach that isn't going to lend credence to some of that, even though we say it happens everywhere. So I'm probably going to choose to support the coach.
Sure.
Because the coach is more of indicative of what I love, which is the university.
Well, especially if that coach has characteristics that line up with what we value.
Well, I just think when I said, and it's funny because I'm kind of going out on a limb sometimes because I know I could get a ton of egg. Like if it doesn't work, I mean, it's like
Yeah. If it
And-
doesn't work with the rule, we're both going to have to eat it.
No, I mean, as are lots of people.
Yeah.
But that's okay
Mhm.
because I've seen the last 20 years. Odds are not in my favor.
Yeah. But
Odds are not in my favor. So
I want to ride with the guy who believes what I believes in the same things I do.
until he's not our guy.
Yeah.
Right. So I think what I just want to go back to that cushion of what I think the players need in order to thrive in this environment.
Yeah.
That you'd like to instill, that I try to speak into existence with the coaches and adults. That's why I always say the first characteristic I would take is somebody that doesn't need a babysitter. Why? Not just because I'm pro toughness, right? I'm clearly a softie in some aspects, right? It's just that this place is a lot to take on. Why don't I begrudge guys that want to leave the state? No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand
It's
that
a lot.
Josh Banderas is a guy that I have a great conversation with. I think he's exceptionally bright. I think he's got tremendous self-awareness. I think he'll tell you about the pros and cons. And this isn't a deal to pit one against another. This is a deal to be educated going forward to help explain why I think some coaches make the decisions that they make. This is a deal to explain why I think some coaches make the decisions that they make. Nothing more than that. Right? People are they're gonna receive and process information the way that they will, but coaches are responsible for 100 and however many people it's gonna be going forward, and those are the things that I think that they have to rally around, and I think that's what you want them to rally around.
100%.
It may come in with a cost, though.
Well,
it may come with a price.
most things worth having do is kind of the dirty little secret.
And Doug asked me a question earlier. How much do I think this has to a percentage of how much I think this has to do with short term versus long term? The answer to that question is I don't really know, but I think initially, like if you ask me on like Monday after or whatever, or last week, Monday, I get them confused because they didn't play. I'd say it's about the short term.
Yeah. I'll take Coach Rhule at his word there.
I don't know about the long term. I think this is about getting your team the best. I think it's two-pronged. I said this earlier. I think it's about giving your team the best chance to get to a bowl game. And this is like the Strainer colander moment where you're putting stuff in and you're going to give it a shake.
See what's left.
And you're going to see what's left. Whatever's left is that's all you can eat. That's it.
Yeah, that's all that's left.
That's all that's left. That's all you can eat. Everything else, you're going to have to chalk it up as a loss.
Yeah.
Eat it and throw it away. Golden Corral does it every day. Man, I hate to throw away all this food. We wasted a lot of money.
Yeah.
Man, that's the cost of doing business, whether it's players, whether it's coaches. Some of these guys that are like this whole the NIL and what you're entitled to, and you're not owed anything. You're not owed anything. You're not.
Yeah.
You guys need to be in the colander too. Parents the same way. Like, and I'm not telling you anything I'm not experiencing. You think I don't want my kid to play?
Yeah.
You think I can't see what's going on sometimes on the back end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Yeah. Proof is in the pudding. I'm the walking litmus test. Right?
You trust what's going on.
To practice what I preach.
Yeah.
It's going to come at a cost.
You shouldn't be in a great mood right now.
No, heck no. Heck no.
Let's get to a couple calls here on the hotline.
And he is.
He is what?
Pissed off.
Oh, yeah. That much is clear.
And he can say that without saying, well, a lot of it is my fault. Because he did say a lot of it is my fault.
Let's get to TK on the Hurrdat hotline. TK, what's going on, man?
Good morning, fellas. How we doing?
What's up, champ?
So, my favorite objection in the court of law is asked and answered. So, it's exactly how it sounds. If a defense attorney keeps badgering your witness on cross-examination, about the same question, I can just say those 3 magic words, and they can't ask that question anymore.
What? I plead in the fifth? Like what?
No. They can't keep badgering my witness
if they've already
about
answered
the same question over and over again.
Yeah. Okay. I got you.
Do you guys ever feel like Coach Rhule wants to say that in the media sessions?
Yeah, I think he's growing. I think he's growing before our very eyes on what it takes. That's what I think. I don't know if he could like wave a magic wand, yeah, but there's this sicko part of him that's like, I'm gonna grow from this. I'm competitive. Let's see what I can learn. So he just goes through it. I mean, he could shut down access, but he's not going to.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like, he's pretty upfront with everybody. Like, he's one of the few coaches that I've ever seen who has to actively stop himself from telling more of the truth.
Yeah,
that is 100% true.
And then people still don't believe him. Like, we got people, it's what makes Nebraska great and terrible, the fans. We have some people who think that we're going to come out and run the air raid on Saturday, or we're never going to run the ball ever again. So I'm like, guys, he told you exactly why he made the move. The offense needs to be more rhythmic, and we need somebody up there who has a different view of how you call a game.
Mm.
And you had to say it like 8 or 9 times.
TK, appreciate the call as always. He told you exactly what's going to happen. He said we're not switching to the air raid in a bye week. He said we're going to see what we do well. We're going to see what players are making plays, and we're going to put those 2 things together to simplify some things. He said maybe we're doing 20 things right now. Maybe we need to be doing 4. Right? He told you exactly what's going to happen. And TK is right. Maybe we need to listen to him when he tells us the truth a little bit more often, because he usually tells us the truth.
Denny brings up a good point. He said, how much pride did it take Rhule to swallow and put Nebraska first when he went to the portal to get an OC? He's a developer, and that had to sting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
100%. Let's get to Lance on the new OC. Lance, what's going on?
Hey, guys.
What up?
I'm just enjoying this nice brisk weather. I really enjoy the change. I think, for Rhule to pull this thing, I think what it really boils down to, I think people, we're talking about seeing ghosts with guys on the playing field, but what this boils down to is he wants to win, man. He's like, hey, this isn't working. I go back and I watch film. It's really not working. So how do I get this team to win right now? And I think what he probably did is he probably had a talk with Dana, and Dana is like, hey, you have these players, but you're not running plays that are really designed for these guys, and this is why you aren't having big plays or large scoring drives. And I think when you sit down with Rhule, and he wants to win more than anything else, I think it was probably a pretty easy decision for him.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that you have an OC now that can clean up some things and say, hey, I have enough experience to know that if I had this type of talent, I'm going to run these plays. And I think that's probably what it took. I think people are building some large hurdles out there. And for Rhule, all he wants to do is win. I think that's what this boiled down to. Is it hard to demote a friend? Sure. But at the end of the day, he wants to win, and that's all that matters. I mean, this guy's here for 8 years. So anyone that's texting Damon that's saying like, hey, this is his one and only chance, he's going to be here for a long time no matter what the outcome is. So, I mean, enjoy the ride. And I'm glad we finally have someone that wants to have that desire to come out and win.
Here's the other thing, Lance, that I think kind of we're missing is on the surface when we talk about just doing a few things well, like that can pay immediate dividends. I don't think he was like jerking our chain when he said if it's worth 7 points or a few more third down conversions, because when you historically play close games, that's kind of how you think of it when you make moves. So maybe it won't be something as obvious as, well, they used to run this play with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have a different player. It could be, well, we don't even run that play anymore.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it could be a lot of different things.
Well, one of the stats that we're in the top 20 in offense is we're a top 20 team in terms of the number of third downs we face, which isn't always a good stat for efficiency. But like you're saying, if you can turn, I think it's just under 7 first downs a game. If you can add 2 or 3 first downs to that,
yeah,
I mean, it's a totally different ballgame.
It's huge.
Lance, appreciate the call. Yep. Coming up next, we're going to talk to somebody who knows a little bit about championship mentality. That's Gary Green. He is the CEO and owner of Union Omaha. They're playing for a championship on Sunday. We'll talk to him coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. As I mentioned, we've got Gary Green coming up here in a little bit, CEO of Union Omaha. At 9, we've got our regular Thursday guest, our guy Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. And then, in case you forgot, with all the news and notes of the week, we do have a football game this weekend against USC. We're going to talk to Ryan Abraham, who covers USC for Inside Troy. Who
do you think's having a better week of press conferences?
I know who's having a more interesting week of press conferences. It's kind of funny because somebody asked me yesterday before the news came down, and I don't remember who it was on Twitter, so I apologize. But somebody asked me if I thought bringing Leach in might actually be not Leach, Holgerson. Sorry.
Yeah, you sound. Never mind.
If bringing Holgerson in was because him and Riley both came from the Leach tree, and he might be able to help out with some of the defensive concepts in terms of what they'd be seeing on Saturday. And I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting way to look at it.
Well, Coach Rhule talked about getting both perspectives with talking or zooming with Snow, and a lot of it is.
We talked about it at Baylor too.
Yeah.
Or at Temple, I think, when
and Baylor, when they brought him in to go over how they got diced
how they got their head beat in.
Yeah. And he goes, "Are you sure you want me to do this?"
It's like, yes.
Yeah. So
So there might be something to that.
I do think there's something to that.
Yeah.
Like if I were to sit, I'm not going to put myself in the same conversation as Snow, but like sometimes, like if you want to know our game plans or how we defend something or what we're seeing, like I would ask us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a fair point. And genuinely, because this was before the press conference yesterday when he was talking about kind of his relationship with
I mean, I think everybody does that. You think I haven't asked Coach Rhule or somebody or White or whomever? Like, I remember I asked Chen about how to +1 to like 2 buys with 1 back. Like, that's just what people do.
Yeah. I just think I thought it was an interesting question because not very many people were talking about, hey, opponent specific coming up this week, and this guy has a pretty extensive history in doing what Lincoln Riley does.
I had to get rid of all my storage. Not all, but a lot.
On your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked you about clearing the cache or whatever you call it, the catches. And I have a video that I recorded with Danny Langsdorff. And we're talking about I was on the defensive side of the ball, and we're talking about like the evolution of RPO, how are you putting guys in conflict? And he's talking about having to go research QB run game because they're not really familiar with it, and how RPO might be the thing.
Yeah.
You know how long ago that was?
8 years? 9 years?
Well, I didn't want to delete it, but I did.
4, 6, 8, 12.
Because so that would have been before the first year, so 2015?
Yeah. They had just come back from figuring out who to go talk to implement quarterback run game with TA.
Yeah. I mean, so that's almost 10 years ago.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I was like, holy smokes.
Well, and you have to, right?
You can hear me say, hey, do you mind if I record this? And then I have a banker where I don't know, my camera must have fallen because you can just see his head up.
A little sideways?
Yep, looking at him like this. Like, golly, who's the camera dude? Yeah.
No, that's no.
I would ask all the time, and I asked an offensive guy what he would do about how we wanted to play defense.
So I do think that's the part
It's
that's
huge.
That's helpful, right? Is because the more you can understand the concepts you're trying to defend, the better chance you're going to have of defending that successfully, right?
Sometimes on our scout cards,
Mhm.
we drop other teams' plays, and we run them. Coach Sikora will say, "Hey, backside this, because he's on offense."
Yeah.
So he knows. So we'll say, "Okay, hey, Turbo." I said, just call it, like run it like that.
Yeah.
Say, hey, you may not get two pullers. He may pen, and he sometimes they'll just fold this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, ooh, tell him to do that, right? Like we do that all the time. That's just what people do.
Well, I think it's a little underrated too, because we talked earlier in the season about specifically with Dylan about kind of teaching concepts versus teaching plays.
Yeah,
right. But I think that works the opposite way too. So if you're a defense and you understand the concepts of what the offense is trying to accomplish, you're going to have a better chance.
Yeah, 100%.
Because then you're not trying to just memorize all the plays, right? It's like
that was one of the refreshing things. I'm glad he said yesterday.
Yeah.
Don't think so much about an individual play or a diagnosis as much as what do we do? Like what is it that we do?
And I think that's one of the things that put Nebraska in a bad spot against Indiana was I think it felt like they were trying to defend plays where it was the concept that was putting them in conflict.
Yeah, I don't need to see Carter Nelson going over the top, right?
Yeah, I'm okay there. Let's get to Gary.
As an example.
Yes, just hypothetical. Let's get to Gary Green. He's the CEO and owner of Union Omaha, who is having quite the season and will wrap it up on Sunday. Gary, how are you this morning?
Doing great this morning. Very excited.
This is the longest I think I've gone in over a year without talking to you, man. Like, how are things? I know you're winning, but we just got off this whole soapbox about it being more than winning. How's life?
Life is good. Life is good. I moved to Colorado. I got my two kids, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old girls. And really, closer to Nebraska and closer to Omaha. And, but really, really enjoying life. We sold the Storm Chasers, as you know, to be able to focus on soccer and double down on that. And, we had to make it clear to people that we are staying in the market. We love the market, but we just needed to focus on men's and women's soccer.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's paid dividends. How do you not feel spoiled with kind of this new franchise that's gotten off to such a meteoric start? And you're playing for another championship. It's supposed to be harder than this.
Well, you got to do things differently, and we do things differently. And I don't want to give out the secret sauce, but and we do things differently, and kind of reflects what we want to be as an organization, and reflects a certain level of caring for the players. And as I always tell them, and I told them at the beginning of the season, we want them to be better people. And on the way out than the way in, and we want men to become boys and men's and boys to become champions. And it's a lot more than just saying, hey, it's about wins and losses. It's about caring about their careers, letting them know we care about their careers, and it helps us attract good players.
Gary, you've got to be kidding me. We just talked about this whole first segment about when you're in sports and you're an overseer, it has to be something other than just the results if you want any longevity. And you just say what you say. No, I promise you, it's incredible how somebody with that much success and business acumen understands it has to be bigger than just the bottom line, even though sometimes we may not see it like that as we're critiquing it along the way.
No, absolutely. And I was not listening to the show. I was having my coffee. I was having my coffee here on Mountain Time, so I was not listening.
Gary, we, obviously this is the third year that Union Omaha has won the regular season, trying to get the second league title in the playoffs on Sunday. What have you seen this year, kind of going from last year to this year, that has made this team so special in their quest for another title?
Well, the team was pretty special last year too.
Yeah.
And with the consecutive undefeated streak, we have a lot of the same core group, and when that core group stays together a second year, they're really tight. They're really a family, and I think one of the advantages we have is that we're able to put all the players for the most part under the same roof instead of scattering them all over the city, which is what a lot of teams do. So they only see each other during practices and games, and I think that creates kind of a family environment and an environment where they travel together, but they live together, and that's good stuff. That's really good stuff. And that wasn't what I planned out to do or what we thought we should do. It just ended up that way.
Gary, I know I don't want you to give away the secret sauce, but how challenging is it for you to be able to keep teams together and the core together from year to year, like you were talking about from last year to this year, especially at this level of professional soccer where it seems like there's a ton of turnover with other teams?
No, there's turnover with our team too. Like, we don't have any less turnover than other teams. We've been lucky to have such an amazing coach and Coach Casciato. Obviously an amazing coach with Coach Mims, and they both have recruited off of talent and character, and found talent where others didn't. And it's convincing players to come because we're going to be good for their career after. It's convincing players to come to be part of something special. And initially, look, we were like everybody else, and there was nothing special there. We didn't have the track record. And now, you mentioned Union Omaha, and we're the standard that other teams want to get to. And why wouldn't you want to join that standard if you had the opportunity?
Championship in Omaha, potential. I'm sorry, Gary, no jinx for a championship in Omaha. Yeah. That's got to sound pretty good, right? I mean, this is what you strive for.
Well, look, the regular season in Europe is really the championship. So to me, we've won 3 championships already by having the best standings. Playoffs are more of a U.S. thing with teams. So to me, we've won 3, but I know that we get to put the star above our owl if we win the playoffs.
Gary, tell people how they can be a part of this championship mentality that all the players want to be a part of as well, coming up on Sunday, right?
Absolutely. Look, we have fans that understand how exciting it is and are on the ground floor of this before we scale this thing. But, please come out. We have entry-level pricing at $18. We have group pricing at $15. The box office, if you want to buy the same day, the box office opens at 11 a.m. for a 2 p.m. match. And really, it's going to be, it's not expensive to get in. We have better seats that are a little more expensive, but it's going to be exciting. And I love our fans were so into it last Saturday. We had the fans on the berm yelling Union, and then the fans behind the third base dugout yelling Omaha. And they were going back and forth across the entire soccer pitch. And, it's different. It's different than baseball. It's very different. And we're loud. We have smoke. Every time we score, I have a group of fans looking up to the owner's box, waiting for me to light off smoke. Like, they're looking at me. And I forgot to do it. I forgot to do it last game because I was so excited about the goal. And they're looking at me and they're chanting smoke, smoke, smoke. So it's a nice tradition that we've created, lighting smoke out of the owner's box. And as long as the wind blows the right way and doesn't get in my face, it's really enjoyable.
Gary, we appreciate the time as always, and we look forward to seeing you out there on Sunday.
Best wishes, buddy.
All right. Thanks. You guys are awesome. Appreciate it.
That's Gary Green, CEO and owner of Union Omaha. We'll be back. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, where you can join us a week from Friday for our final live breakfast of the year prior to the Wisconsin game. Get to eventbrite.com, search for Hurrdat Sports Radio to join us and reserve your tickets, where you can also win a couple of tickets to the Wisconsin game the next day, courtesy of our friends from Tickets for Less. Jumping back in, a lot of comments in this discussion, as you can imagine, from YouTube and everywhere else. Honestly, kind of all over the map, but one that I do think has kind of flown under the radar a little bit with everything that was happening with Dana Holgorsen is the fact that it does sound like there's legitimately some question about who might be playing quarterback this week.
Yeah.
In terms of just health.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
100%. And he's super guarded.
Yeah.
And there's no sense in getting into it. I mean, we'll just kind of have to be like everybody else and see what happens. No,
I do wonder, just from a standpoint of if it does have to be somebody else besides Dylan, like it just adds kind of to the intrigue of the play call change, the coordinator change, and then you've also got this other variable there. Like, I wouldn't touch this line against UCLA with a 10-foot pole because there are just USC with a 10-foot pole. There's just so many variables here that we have no way of having any idea about.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you can't factor in, which you have to be really, really careful of, is emotion.
Yeah.
So it's a game that's predicated on channeling emotion, and we'll see. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things about football. I was talking to T. Mose yesterday, and he's like, I don't love the matchup with you guys this week against North.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Why is that? He said, man, you just know there's that game or two a year where Larry will get those guys like ramped, and I'm thinking that's the one thing that people think they understand.
You can't count for.
But if you could bottle it, you could cap things a whole lot better if you can manage emotion. So we'll see. I'll be curious to talk to our guy at 943 because I think, especially if you go back to the little snippets from Lincoln Riley last week and kind of what's on your algorithm for social media, whether it's TikTok or X, man, it's been a weird couple of weeks for him to have to answer questions.
Yeah.
And so you don't know what the temperament is. Like, what situations did Moss leave under? And with Maivia, like, what do you think about this facet of the offense? And, like, kind of where are they? And conversely, for Nebraska, we're thinking to ourselves, oh, man, how many kind of dividends can Holgerson pay in 8 days or whatever?
Yeah.
Right. You don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's absolutely no way to know.
You have no idea. And I do like the fact that no coordinators are available today because you have a game. If this was last week, maybe.
Yeah.
But not this week. Like, you're forced to dial in and keep it moving.
Well, I mean, I like the fact that he goes, hey, you guys are good at your jobs, and I'm not trying to give anything away, so we're not going to have them available.
And I think that's kind of
the truth.
That has a lot to do with it.
100%.
Right? Like the whole quarterback, because he just kind of glossed over Dylan not practicing.
Yeah, he's like, oh, we hope he's going to practice tomorrow. It's like, wait, I'm sorry, what?
Huh? What?
Because the initial report 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago was like, yeah, they expect him to be ready for USC.
Yeah.
And you hear yesterday, it's like, well, we'd like him to practice, which is a good start.
It's kind of slid that on in.
It's a little important.
Shane, go ahead. There's a clip that was Sasha on that one, Shane, or was it just the two of us?
It was all three.
Just the two of us. Can you play clip 8, Shane?
Yeah.
There hasn't been I haven't had a ton of like that conversation, I think the players have just kind of battled through last week. Last week was a tough week, obviously, for us, right? So I think they kind of battled through it. I gave the seniors a couple days off, just to kind of catch their breath. They've done so much for the program, and I wanted the young guys to know last week, like, hey, this is not about next year. This is about right now. Like, get better now. And so it was good. You have some guys, maybe they're on the scout team. All of a sudden now they're up there playing. And then Thursday we all came back together. And I think Dana had just done a good job of saying, hey, guys, I'm just here to help. And so it has, I'm sure in the locker room there's seismic conversations, don't get me wrong, but no one's come to me with, hey, coach, I think this is a good move or a bad move. I think they've just kind of said, hey, what are we doing next? And I think I will say this, just being out on the field and watching, I think it's all flowed really seamlessly and really smoothly. And that was really the take from Phil. Like, Coach Snow came in and was like, I trust Phil with my life, and he was like, man, you got a really good group of kids. You got a good defensive staff. It's just some of these games, it's just like a play here, a play there. It's like, you're knocking the quarterback out of bounds on 3rd and 8 when you need to come around and sack fumble the ball, right? So it's just, just a little edges here and there that we're fighting for.
How many times?
Don't undersell that statement.
Which part?
The part where the players, like their level, their role, their importance of seeing change, whether it induces panic or opportunity.
Yeah.
Because I think you're at a critical juncture. Because he's letting you know, hey man, I told you we're going to do everything we can to get to a bowl game.
Yeah. We're going to do it whatever we can to.
And after that, we'll evaluate it again.
Yeah. I mean, he said it last week. I will do whatever needs to be done to get this thing over the top.
I felt like that was important to hear.
It is, and I also think, there's this part of The Last Dance where Michael Jordan's talking about how he was sometimes viewed as like a bully or a tyrant, and somebody asks him, would your teammates describe you as a nice guy? And he kind of goes into this thing about how, maybe they wouldn't say I'm a nice guy, but you know what they will say about me? That I never asked them to do a thing I wasn't willing to do.
Yeah. I think that's pretty important.
I think it's incredibly important.
I really do. Shane, can you play clip 18, please?
He's always had the things that you're looking for to beat man and zero in the red zone. Like when you get down into the red zone, you're looking to have receivers who can run options. We played him when he had David Sills, and we still have a 2-point play called Mountaineer, that he beat Texas with, which just gives the quarterback a lot of flexibility and variations, But I think his commitment to both running the football and being aggressive in the passing game is good. It's tough to defend because you're always defending 50-50. And, if you play outside leverage, he's going to run a slant. If you play inside leverage, he's going to run a fade. I mean, there's so many things going against him that have been hard and difficult to go, to do. When they beat us really badly one year at West Virginia. And then he left the next year, and Jake Spavital took over. He was his OC, took over at Texas State. And we brought Jake in, and he went through every single play call with our defense. Phil Snow sat there, our entire defense sat there, and we listened to him go through every play. He almost was like, "You sure you guys want me to do this?" I was like, "Yes, we're going to learn from it, right?" So that improved us. We went on that next year and won 11 games, and we're really a great defense. So just having that inside knowledge of why they did what they did against us and how they did it. But I think the options that they give guys and the freedom they play with is something that I think our offensive players need, and something that I probably don't do a good enough. I'm probably more of a defensive guy, and so again, I'm just looking at myself very honestly. I think we're doing like 95% of the right things. Like this area, it just hasn't come along the way I wanted. So I said, hey, you know what? Let's find someone who can help you. And I say that because it's really important to me that while the onus always goes on the coaches, there's some onus on the players. As the leader, I have to make the right decisions, and I'm hoping I made the right one. I feel very good about it since Dana's been here for a week.
A lot in there.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, I told you about the questions that I get sometimes, like I'm in Nebraska City, or the people ask me, we're talking about the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, people confuse. This is when I went on the whole diatribe about screen game versus quick game, and people are trying to tell me that they're the same. I'm like, they're not. With Nebraska, we do this. And
there's called plays versus check to me, the whole thing.
Check with me's, and then I said, now, if you want to talk to me about changing check with me's and passing concepts, I'm willing to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But if you're just telling me about what you see that you don't like, we can't really have that conversation. You're just going to express your opinion that you don't like it, and I'm going to be like,
there's not really a conversation to be had.
I'm going to be like, oh, okay. Like, it's not very productive. We can't win on the outside. So where am I going with that? You listen to his answer about inside leverage versus outside leverage, slants versus fades, and giving players freedom on option routes.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't listen to anything else he said yesterday, and you want to know about the offense in terms of capability, focus on that. Because now it turns in, because the guy in Nebraska City asked me, like, how about just like some inside slants or And I said, well, it's more about one-on-ones and individual matchups.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that's where they are with their concepts.
Yeah.
Right? If they can make that gradual shift, you can go from a team that gets to the 40-yard line, 2/3 of the time, 60% of the time, so 3/5 of the time, but a team that doesn't score on 57% of those chances, if you can up that by 6 points, you change dramatically. And those options allow you to do that in condensed sets.
We've got Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7 coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are joined now by our friend Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. What's up, Schaefer?
Not a ton. I saw you sneak a little yawn in there as you guys came back. Are you you need a little pep, Ravi?
I haven't.
Can we get you a coffee? I see you have a Monster over there.
Yeah, I haven't finished the Monster yet. Gotta get going a little bit.
I figured with this big Nebraska basketball week ahead, you'd just be bouncing off the walls as a big Nebraska basketball guy such as yourself.
Huge Nebraska basketball guy. I actually do have a question for you. How concerned are you about Nebraska's offense in basketball? We've been talking a lot about in football, but the basketball offense,
look at his little wry smile,
is a little bit dicey.
Yeah, it's not great when you only outscored the football team's effort against Bethune-Cookman by so much. So that was an ugly game on Saturday. I'm reserving judgment until I see what happens for the rest of the week, but it was if they have that shot in their bag and that shot gets played during Big Ten conference play, like they might score 40 points. So
yeah, legitimately though, and I'm kind of kidding here a little bit, but I thought shooting was going to be a concern coming into this season for this team. Like how at this point we've seen a few sample sizes between scrimmage, exhibition, a couple of regular season games now. Like how worried are you about their ability to shoot the basketball?
A little bit. I want to see, especially when you just wholesale change out as much as Nebraska basketball does, I do want to see a few more games before I get overly concerned on it. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen one of Connor Essegian or Gavin Griffiths get off to a little bit better of a start. The fact that Raleigh Wooster hit both of his threes to start might be a bad thing because he might continue to shoot them, which is certainly not his shot. It's kind of like the Josiah Alec thing. Like every time he's going to take one now, I'm going to be like, oh, bad shot. And then if it goes in, it's only going to embolden potentially more bad shots. So, I just kind of want to see how it looks. One of the things that happened Saturday is that you just didn't get – I think they're going to have to need Bryce Williams to score 18 to 20 points a game in general. And so when he played – sort of lackadaisical and off on Saturday, the whole team just sort of really took a hit because of it. And so it seems kind of simplistic, but if Bryce is off, Nebraska's really going to struggle to score points. Like they're going to rely a lot more, I think, on hero ball in 24-25 than they certainly had to last year.
Schaefer, I joked about this last week. It's not funny anymore, especially on the heels of what you just said. But remember how Bardo used to always ask if Roby knew how good he was during almost every broadcast. Don't you feel like that same thing kind of with Bryce Williams, where you look up and
yeah.
Like how, bro, do you only have 6 shot attempts? Like, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
And then it's to me, it's a combination of the shot attempts, and then it's like on the court decision making. When he's decidedly not trying to score, his passing and decision making is below average, and that's kind of concerning at times because, like, if you're using him as a decoy and he needs to get the ball to somebody else, like, I need to trust that ball isn't going to end up in the second row, and would say sometimes that it does. I think Bryce Williams can be very good. I'm hoping that we see a sustained run of that here during this non-conference, which isn't, they're not playing outside of Creighton and St. Mary's. They don't really have anybody talented on their schedule. So he has a long runway to kind of build some confidence and play that way. And he finished last year 3 straight games with 20 plus points, starts off 20-plus points. You get Bethune-Cookman, and it's just a dud. I don't know. Just the ups and downs of college athletics.
Any positives to take away from? I mean, they only made 19 field goals, so I know you're going to say something smart about that. But, I mean, 19 made field goals and 11 assists. And he, he's like,
like push that assist number up and the field goal number goes up. I don't know what else to say. That's the best I can do.
Dave, do you think at all, going back to Bryce Williams here for a second, and this might be sort of a weird analogy, but do you think at all like maybe he lacks a little bit of a intuitive feel? Because you brought up
I kind of think that's Berkey.
Because you kind of, and it could be a couple guys, frankly, because it's not a super dynamic offensive team. But I sometimes I watch guys like Bryce Williams, and I'm like, hey, if like he should be a little bit either more aggressive or more assertive, whatever. But you mentioned something interesting there where it seems like he kind of predetermines when he's going to try and score versus when he's not going to try and score. And I wonder if you get that sense at all, with I look at Nebraska's running backs on the other side of things. I go, sometimes I feel like they kind of predetermine when they're going to bounce something outside, or they predetermine when they're going to make a little when they predetermine when they're going to cut back, when there's a hole there, where there's not. And like I kind of get that same sense. It's like, okay, Bryce Williams physically has just about all the things you would want out of a basketball player, right? Especially at this level. A lot of Nebraska's running backs have a lot of the features you would want physically, especially,
Are you teeing him up for running backs?
Like
this is going to be great.
Emmett Johnson or Dante Dowdell. Like, you look at Dowdell and you're like, man, that guy should be pretty damn good at running back. But he just doesn't necessarily seem to have that intuitive feel. But every once in a while, when he predetermines right, it looks really good.
I have to say, this is one of my favorite cross sports analogies, comparisons I think I've ever been around for. In large part because I was like, where the hell is this going? And then I found myself agreeing. So, kudos to you, because you took me on an adventure there, and I walked through the door, and I'm like, I get what you're saying with it. I'll focus probably more on the running backs because I assume that's more of what people want in this discussion. But Damon would know better than any other person, certainly in this conversation, and most that pay attention. But it a lot of times feels like those guys are just guessing as soon as they get the ball. Like they're guessing like, okay, I don't know if the hole is going to be there, but I think I can bounce this one out almost immediately upon getting the ball. Instead, where it seems like your best running backs at least angle towards where the run is supposed to be before deciding like what they're seeing in front of them. Like they're reacting and not guessing. And it feels like Nebraska's running backs guess. And why I think that way is there's several times a game, something will be right there that is blocked up, is supposed to be there. And yet they've already decided they're going to bounce it outside, or they're going to cut this way, or whatever it is. I just don't know that collectively the vision amongst the running backs is, I don't know that any of them, maybe Ramir is the best at it. I think Emmett Johnson has the best ability to make a mistake and then still turn it into a positive gain. I just think kind of Dowdell bounces off of whatever's in front of him. So the running back vision, I definitely have concerns on. And it's why I think they're limited. It's why none of these guys feel like they're just a quintessential, you can trust, turn around, give them a bunch of carries and pile up the runs that way. Like I don't, for as much struggles as the offensive line has had, I don't feel like they get a lot of help from the running backs at times either.
So that's funny. And I could talk about this all day, so I'll try to move on to something else here quickly. Anecdotally, I think you're right, Schaefer. I really do. But I think it's for a couple reasons, if you guys want to process through this with me. I think part of them appearing like they're guessing is because they don't rep it enough. I don't think the same guy rep the same kinds of plays enough over and over and over in practice, because when you rep things a ton, you get a good feel for when it really happens. Then it doesn't come across as like, oh shoot, they played it this way this time, they didn't play it that way the last time. So I think that's spot on. You know what I'm curious to see though, Schaefer, is if you do that more, will I be more apt to break tackles or come out of the back end? Because I've done this so much. I know what feels right when I see it. You know what I mean? So we may not be seeing the best versions of those guys because they don't do it enough, right? It's like if I run duo 25 times against two fronts, I know ultimately where it's going to break if it breaks. It won't surprise me. But if I only run duo 6 times and I split it 8 times in practice and you know what I mean? It's like, oh shoot, man, that guy played over the top of that, man. And all of a sudden he shows it and he's in your face. Like if you run a play enough times, you know it doesn't bounce, right? So that's why sometimes you're like, why did he just cut that across that guy's face? I'm like, I don't think he expected him to be there because he probably doesn't see it enough. You know what I mean?
So that was going to be my question, DB.
If that makes sense.
Is it? If you rep something enough and get comfortable with it, do you have an idea where the free defender is going to be?
Yes.
And then you can break the tackle?
Yes.
Because like it feels like it surprises them sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of like his. That's a good Schaefer. That just
so what
so the guessing thing and the coming out of the back end, I think is something. The great ones just I can make my guy miss. But if you're not dealing with elite, which we've all decided we're not, I think sometimes the reps can kind of help you. All right, in this play, that free defender is going to be the box safety or the low hole guy, or that's the guy I'm going to have to deal. Like the more you do it, the more you know where it's going to happen.
So then are we talking about if they're not getting enough reps in practice of doing this, is it because they're trying to play too many running backs? So guys aren't getting the work at practice, or is it because as committed as they want to be to the running game,
I think it's too many concepts. I think it's too many concepts.
So it's streamlined and efficient.
Guys, right?
Yeah, because this is just my theory, and other running, but like some of these other guys can tell you this. So historically, there would be like 6 plays, right? It'd be some weeks we'd run 32 belly, some weeks we'd run 32 trap. Same concept, different variation. We'd rep it against multiple fronts. It looks the same. 43 dive and 47 draw look the same, but there's some subtle nuances. So we had to do those over and over and over again. And we were playing 4 guys, so I'm not going to say it's too many guys. I'm saying it's the same plays over against different looks that I think free you up to know like where you're vulnerable and what your reads are. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Okay. Because obviously if we're getting into the conversation that it's a rep thing, then it's like, okay, most of us, and I include media here, it's not like we're at practice to see how it's divvied up or what that exactly looks like. So you kind of have to take us inside on that one.
Yeah, I think, Schaefer, the reason, and DB, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I think obviously there's 2 variables if somebody's not getting enough reps, right? It's either too many guys are splitting the reps or you're repping too many different things so you don't get a ton of any one thing. But I would think that kind of the way we know or have known Rhule to run practices in the past where you've got a bunch of different stations and guys working on a bunch of different things simultaneously, that would sort of alleviate the too many guys problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why when Damon initially said not enough reps, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting because I wouldn't think that from the outside looking in. But if it's an idea that your offense has too many concepts, or you're trying to do all of these different things, or try it, with the subtle variances across all of these different either formations or concepts, then that would change for the individual running backs based on how much time they're getting with each one. Or the looks that you're going against with how you're prepping your scout team. Because as they've said, and we kind of mock it, but it is true. If your scout team is running a look all week long and then they come out in something entirely different, you do have to adjust to that.
Oh, that
is a thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's like we laugh, but it's like there's plenty of times where I'm like, oh shoot, man, we weren't expecting the 3 front, or we weren't expecting this. Now you do want to hope you can adjust, but it does happen.
Well, that's where the in-game coaching has to be, it's hard, I think, for media or fans to hear when Matt Rhule basically says like, oh, they did something different And, that's what you expect as a football fan. Like, you're not expecting the same thing every week. So you're assuming the coaching staff is then able to step in and be like, all right, this is what we're seeing. This is how you have to counteract it. Like, that's the chess game inside the game.
Schaefer, when you're looking at so like an example of that, Schaefer, would be the concepts that UCLA was running in the passing game, and they kept winning on those little intermediate routes. Like, if you watched them a couple of weeks ago, like, they weren't winning because either it was timing or ball placement. So early on, when Garbers was kind of on a heater, I was like, fudge. Like, they weren't doing this earlier. So clearly the bye week worked. But what Nebraska had to do is, okay, we got to kind of leverage this different. If he's going to make these whole throws, we're not going to give him this.
Right.
So we have to change it in the second half. And they did. And the one time that Gilmore got loose, it was the same concept that he got Charles with earlier in the game, where he kind of, he tightened down his split and then he ran the little 7 cut. And I was like, damn, like, the one time you fell asleep again, you paid the price. But they did make adjustments.
Well, and that's one of those things, in the immediacy after the UCLA game where everything is trash and everyone's being thrown under the bus and you maybe lose a little bit of perspective with it. You come back from it. The defense, after really the first quarter and a half, I felt like it kind of locked into what they were going to do. It's 13-7. And then you get that just game-changing, crippling pick 6 that puts you on your heels. The offense continues to struggle. They hit that one other play. Otherwise, the defense played pretty well in the second half. It's just that first drive, an 8-minute, march right down the field. And I think the thing that kills me with Nebraska's secondary, it's why I have the toughest time thinking that they can just turn it on and turn it off. So many of these throws just are open. Like, guys are just, there's not a lot of contested throws sometimes with Nebraska's defense. Like,
but the same concept.
You see these really high completion percentages. And it's sort of hard. Like, Ethan Garbers is a fine quarterback. He shouldn't be able to go 11 for 12 against your defense. Like, some way, somehow, someone needs to be getting a hand in there, or he needs to get off of a spot, or a defensive back needs to be able to jam at the line of scrimmage and not get blown up in the way that we saw against UCLA. Like, there's also that in there too, where it's just like this defense, for whatever reason, has allowed really high completion percentages. And I think that's a problem too when you're talking about getting off the field on third down.
Schaefer, do you think any part of that is because of, like, the NFL philosophy that John Butler comes from is, hey, if you keep it in front of you, you're going to be fine, right? Like, if you keep it in front of you, you don't get beat deep. Because in the NFL, they're 100% going to exploit that almost every time, right? Whereas I think in college, maybe there's a difference that the percentage of times you're going to get beat deep or beat with a big play is lower than it is in the NFL. Like, do you think there's anything to that?
There could be. I think a lot of it comes down to me is you're asking your defensive line to have a better win rate than what they did against UCLA early in the game. And Nebraska's gamble, and it's been the gamble all year, is if the defensive line can go win up front,
to pressure,
they're going to have success. Yeah. I mean, in Colorado, Ohio State, the two best teams Nebraska played besides Indiana, the defensive line, they dictated that game. Indiana, Nebraska's defensive line, nowhere to be found, crushed. Illinois and UCLA, Nebraska's defensive line struggles. Secondary gets exposed. Like, I think it's really simplistic and almost reductive, but it feels like their gamble with this defense every time out in the passing game, we have to win up front, or at some point we're getting exposed in the back end. We can't cover forever. We have some guys that maybe aren't as good in coverage, so we play off because we don't want anything over the top.
Dave, could I make the argument that maybe there's a little bit of disconnect between what they want the defensive line to do and be and what they're having the defensive secondary do? Because what I hear when you say that, and I agree with you, like, the games where the defensive line has not been impactful have been by far the worst efforts that Nebraska's had. But when I think, and maybe either you or DB can correct me here if I'm wrong, when I think of winning on the defensive line, I go, okay, you want to play close to your receivers then and take away the short throws, because if your defensive line gets you, they can't beat you. They don't have the time to beat you over the top.
And maybe it's not that as complicated, Schaefer. Maybe it's just more like, hey, how can we marry the coverage to the front better?
Sure, yeah.
Well, and I agree with Ravi. I mean, the way that it always made sense to me is if you can get pressure up front, you get the receiver off of the route, or you make that extra beat with the press. But you have to have guys that can physically do that. And I think Tommy Hill can, but we saw it's, hard to ask Jeremiah Charles to do that with grown receivers. He's really that first quarter. I mean, one of the I think it was a third down play where they actually got in Garber's face. I mean, he just blew right by Charles on a press. Like, it's not that they're not trying to do it. It's that I think I would be curious if that's something Blyhill with the longer arms, if that's something that he would be able to bring. Because one of the best that I remember doing this in recent times, Stanley John Baptiste using that physical body, to kind of press and people, take guys out of routes early.
Schaefer, do you think that's obviously we don't see the full-time hire with Dana Holgorsen that we did on the defensive side here, but do you think that's maybe something with Phil Snow, who's got a background in defensive backs? That might, and obviously has a background in what Coach Rhule wants to do, who's talked about getting the 40 sacks a year and talked about getting the defensive line pressure. Do you think that's something he might be able to help on as he's consulting?
I think it's fresh eyes. I think it's, looking at the situation and just seeing if there's some personnel changes that could be helpful, seeing if there's just looking from the outside of the situation and being less close or less emotionally attached to it and just providing a few pointers. I don't know that there's wholesale changes that necessarily have to happen with the defense. And I go back to what, my colleague Michael Bruntz has said for the last month. Nebraska individual players have to win more. They have to win at their position more. And it's not always the guy with the ball. Sometimes it's, on defense, your defensive line has to win more, or your defensive back has to win more. And that's, we can bring in all the consultants in the world. At some point, the guys on the field have to be the ones that get it done.
Dave, fact or fiction, in your opinion, after you heard this deal, you feel like part of the reason Coach Rhule did it is he's convinced himself that he's exhausted all options to now put it on the players?
Hadn't considered it like that. I don't know. Fact or fiction, I can't give you one of those. That's too concrete. I want to live in the gray. Let me live in the gray. It's somewhere in the middle of there.
Oh, man. Good stuff, Schaefer.
That's no fun, Schaefer. No, we appreciate it as always. Great stuff. Glad I could bend your mind a little bit with a basketball football crossover analogy. We will we'll talk to you next week, bud.
Thanks, all right, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Have a great week.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, Campbell and Lincoln.
The more you know, huh?
We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. The more you know, the better you can bet on it, which is brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook, the best place in Nebraska. Place your sports bets. No bets, no glory. Make sure you get to warhorsecasino.com for all the promotions and fun things they have going on at Warhorse Sportsbook. DB, we were talking about something earlier about kind of managing emotions and the way that impacts things in a way that's really difficult to quantify.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm thinking to myself while we're having that discussion, and we were talking about other stuff, so I didn't want to bring it up at the time because I didn't want to derail. I actually showed some rare self-control there to not derail a conversation. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, how much does that apply to different levels of football, right? Because I think we assume the older you get into professional ranks and things like that, the more that's mitigated. And maybe that's true to a certain extent, but then I kind of look at what's going on in the NFL, and I go, man, there's some variables here that a lot of people certainly are not able to account for. And
I saw one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw one in an interview. I know you make fun of me for always watching interviews. At the end of your Niners game.
Yeah.
And it's definitely an intangible variable.
Mm-hmm.
It was George Kittle's level of excitement not for scoring a touchdown, but for talking about the aura and mentality that Christian McCaffrey brings to the table.
So there's an emotional boost when you've got a guy that you know
is going to
is
work.
A dude.
Yep, is going to work every day.
Yeah.
Even as a pro.
Yeah. That's a good tidbit.
It's incredible.
And
this is Kittle, who could make the case for being the GOAT currently.
I think he's the best overall tight end in the league currently.
And I get it. Kelsey fans are going to come for you, but
Kittle does some stuff that Kelsey doesn't do.
Kittle's incredible.
He's so good. And Kelsey's great, don't get me wrong, but like Kittle does some stuff Kelsey doesn't do.
So,
and he's asked to do some stuff.
I'm like at the pro level.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
He was giddy.
Yeah. You want another one?
Yeah. Actually, from that same game, there's a guy that I think emotion matters to a lot.
Who?
Baker.
Oh, yeah.
Baker's emotional state.
And he's kind of unflappable, too.
Yes. Right? But he's got kind of
this dude could play like dog,
and
boo-boo.
And he'll keep coming out there. Like, how else does a guy like Baker Mayfield last year sign on a Tuesday, play on a Thursday, and leads to a game-winning drive for the Rams? Like, that dude's emotional stability, despite being kind of a fiery guy. Yeah. Like, you think there's a little Coach Rhule in Baker Mayfield?
Yeah.
Like, emotionally stable, but like a fiery competitive guy.
You know, you're going to get Vesuvius one day.
Yeah.
And, next time it's like, hey, man, would you like some tea for your Zen? But it's all because I'm competitive. Like, I manage it differently. But here's the other thing. I'll give you a couple more. Where even as a pro, where I think Dan Campbell's temperament matters.
Yeah.
No other team is winning that game against the Texans other than the Chiefs.
100%. But the Chiefs probably do it because Mahomes didn't throw 5 picks. But even with that,
Mahomes has given it to the other team a fair amount this year.
He has.
But it doesn't change the way they play.
Yeah.
Didn't change the way golf played either. And most of that comes from the temperament of their head coach.
So you know what's really weird about that?
No.
Is I agree with you, but Campbell and Reed are very different personalities.
It's so, okay, that's beautiful. Yeah, you're 100% right. But do you know what it is? They still have their team's personality.
Yes, like their
Campbell's
team.
an outwardly fighter, an ankle biter, bite your kneecaps. He's kind of quirky. We're gonna compete.
Yeah,
right. And
he's a chip on the shoulder guy.
And Detroit won 3 games 3 years ago. So they
needed that.
They're like 5 picks. Man, that's nothing. We had 3 wins 3 years ago.
We were 3-13.
We couldn't care less.
Yeah,
right.
5 picks used to be
in the same rate. Vein, but differently. They're like Kansas City's like, we got Andy Reid. Been there, done that.
Hey, we've been down by double digits in the Super Bowl a couple times.
Don't change, and we still win. It's still their personality, just vastly different ways. I'll give you another one.
Yeah,
where it matters in the NFL. Sean Payton made it so personal with Russell Wilson that he ate an unprecedented amount of money for a salary cap
because he couldn't figure it out.
Because he didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
The same guy a year later, a year older, goes to a different organization and he flourishes. And you're not going to tell anybody. Oh,
for a guy that's not a quarterback guru, by the way, or a guy that's not an offensive savant. Whatever.
I mean,
whatever you think Sean Payton is.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin is not considered that
100%
in league circles.
Right.
So you would think out of the 2 guys, Peyton would be able to figure it out. I remember that was the narrative before.
And the NFL culture still matters.
And culture, at the end of the day, is largely about managing emotions.
Managing Russell's brand takes some doing.
And you know what's been a lot quieter?
His brand.
Russell.
Yeah. I don't have to hear your whole let's forge.
Steel City, let's forge.
That stuff matters, man.
So here's my question. I want to go back to Sean Payton and Russell Wilson here for a second, because I think there's a way. I'm going to bring this around kind of in a strange way. But because Russell Wilson was there pre-existing to Sean Payton, right?
Yeah.
He had kind of all these.
It was an okay year.
But he had kind of all these trappings that he was allowed to have before Sean Payton got there.
And Sean Payton got there in the offseason, and he's like, man.
He had the office, he had the staffers, he had whatever, right?
Your own personal people, they're in a guys-to-go situation.
So I'm wondering here, in a situation where we're at Nebraska, some of these guys and their habits pre-exist Coach Rhule, is there a certain point, and are we at that point, where you're like, hey, if you're not on board for the way we want to do things, like this probably isn't the place for you anymore.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird in the Russell Wilson situation because it seemed like he was maybe sort of willing to acquiesce some of those things. And so that's why you kind of have to have some self-awareness if you're the coach too, right? Because I'd like to think Matt Rhule has the self-awareness to be able to identify the guys that are willing to get on board versus the guys that maybe aren't. Like an older guy that we've seen play really, really well this year, John Bullock.
Yep.
Play really, really well this year. If I had to guess, that seems like a guy that's on board.
Yep.
Right? There's other guys that I would point to and go, I don't know. I don't necessarily, like maybe they're a good player, maybe they're a good guy. Not that they're toxic or anything like that, but maybe they've got a little too much baggage to fully be able to get on the train. You know? And that, I think, that kind of matters too. Like there has to be self-awareness on each side of the equation for it to work. And there may have been some self-awareness. I always put it on. I'm not going to say we. I always put it on Russell Wilson because I think he's cheesy and I don't like him very much. He just bothers me. Right? There's nothing wrong with him. He just bothers me. Like he's trying to do too much. But maybe that wasn't a Russell Wilson problem. Maybe that's hey, Russ was willing to acquiesce. And Sean Payton's just like, yeah, I just don't want to deal with it. So he's going to eat $70 million.
Yeah, I don't just like Tomlin because he's a Steelers coach. I like Tomlin because Tomlin says things like, I tell our staff, I don't want to hear about what players can't do. Like where he said this guy's too slow. Or
say that again. Say it one more time.
He doesn't like hearing about what players can't do.
Who else do we know like that?
No, I know.
Okay.
So
they
it's
know
like,
what that is about.
He goes, that's a coaching issue. Right? Coach Rhule said something the other day or yesterday, and I couldn't do cookies because it wasn't slick out. I may find somebody's grass or yard or something. But he goes, he said something to the effect of, now I forgot what I was going to say. Son of a gun. Shane played that dumb drop, and I got thinking about the standard is the standard.
Talking about it being a coaching problem when you can only see what guys can't do.
Oh, fuck.
There's a lot of stuff he says that sounds a lot alike.
Oh my gosh, keep going. It'll come to me.
So I mean, basically, where I'm trying to go with this and land the plane here is, if you're going to bet on something, regardless of its high school, college, NFL, regardless of sport, the thing you should probably bet on, and the reason that you're so bullish on Coach Rhule and Mike Tomlin and whoever else, the reason I don't like a guy like Dion, the reason I'm not totally sure on the sustainability.
I like Fleck and you don't.
I respect what Fleck does. I would just like him to buy some pants that fit. That would be my big thing there. But if you're going to bet on something, I think regardless of sport, regardless on level, it's going to be guys that are able to manage emotions, not only of their teams, but of themselves. And what you're really betting on there is culture. That's Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. We will be back to talk a little USC football. Nebraska's got a game this week coming up next. Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, as well as KFOR in Lincoln. We're joined now by Ryan Abraham, who covers USC football as part of Inside Troy and 24/7 Sports Network. Ryan, how are you this morning?
I'm doing all right. A little bye-week rest and getting ready for some Big Ten football in the Coliseum this weekend. Should be fun.
Ryan, it's interesting, too, on the heels, and this was an impact in my house because I was born in 74, and my dad's a diehard college football fan. Real quickly, do you mind elaborating a little bit on the impact of Coach Robinson and kind of what he meant to that program on the heels of his death, his passing?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's the clip that you played. It's funny. I did recently. Dr. Bartner was the longtime leader of the USC Trojan Marching Band, and they've been part of Hollywood and everything. And he was there for 50 years. And I did a bunch of interviews with him, and he was just. I just remember how he talked about John Robinson, how he really cared about the spirit around USC, and the Trojan Marching Band was a big part of it. And just the glowing, just everything he said about John Robinson, and then to be able to cover him, in his second tenure, there's some good stuff there, with Keith Sean Johnson and winning the Rose Bowl and all that. But, it's his first stint there, and you see some of the assistant coaches that worked for him. And there was just a great legacy that he left, and just loved being part of the program, and, loved winning there and stuff. And when they asked him to come back, he was all about it after, coaching with the Rams and stuff. So he was a big part of it. And, now with him gone, Pete Carroll's the only remaining head coach that's won national championships at USC. So they lost a good one there, and John Robinson. He's just been a great Trojan for his life.
All right, Ryan. You're perfect to speak on this. As a former player that played for Coach Osborne, and now it's covered the last however many coaches since. You always draw the comparisons and the benchmarks. There has to be a little bit of that with SC being such a storied program. You just mentioned Robinson and guys like Carroll. If you're a guy like Lincoln Riley who's had success, but you hadn't really been an SC guy, is that kind of part of the piecing together, or not the getting along, but the overall acceptance while he's still trying to win football games at SC?
I think he's obviously took over an amazing program with Bob Stoops at Oklahoma, and has been trying to find his way in LA. And I don't know if it's just the difference in culture. It's certainly, it's more of an open program. I think he was used to things being sort of closed off, more of a college town versus there's professional sports going on. The Dodgers just won the World Series. There's a lot of things you're kind of competing for as far as eyeballs and sports eyeballs in LA. And I think he's sort of been adapting to a lot of that. But I think if he wins, LA's kind of a, front runner town in a lot of ways. Like if you win, people are going to, follow the team. I think they were ready. I think the fan base was very excited for him to come on board, and then to, see the success in the first year. He had a lot of people behind him, but I think there's been, a level of stubbornness that some of the fans don't like, and just seeing, going 7-5 last year, even though you had the reigning Heisman Trophy winner on your roster, and then this year, only being 4-5, a lot of people have kind of turned on him. So I think it's a point for him to sort of reflect on what's going to be important. What does this program need to start winning? Because I think sometimes you're trying to win your way as opposed to just what's the best thing to do. And right now, it just seems like they can't really get out of their own way. So it's an interesting dilemma that he's sort of in right now, trying to figure out which direction this program needs to go.
Ryan, that's interesting you bring that up, because we're in Nebraska. We're kind of dealing with a very similar thing with Coach Rhule right now. In hey, what has worked at previous stops, and will that work here? Do you see kind of in real time Lincoln Riley going through that process, or seemed almost defiant in some of his public comments over the course, even going back to Big Ten media days? Do you think he's processing that in real time, or is it like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've won a ton of football games. This will work eventually?
Yeah, I think it has to switch from what you just mentioned to the former, and I think people get, and they can become, insulated, where the people around them are just like, this is how it works and this is how we do things. And ironically, USC's kind of been like that as an institution for a long time, like hiring former football players to be their athletic directors.
They're always around, and
they don't know what they're doing. They're just sort of like continue what was working before. And college football's changed a lot, especially in the last few years. And I think some of it's Lincoln Riley being in a new position, new space and new challenges. But USC and I think Lincoln Riley both haven't really adapted to the new world of NIL as quickly as other programs have. And I think that's sort of set them back a little bit too. So you have to reflect on it. Like if you look at, we just failed for a second year in a row, why is it someone else's fault? I think it has to come down to what can I do differently? How can we change? I think he did some good things in the offseason last year, revamping the defensive staff. Now the offensive side isn't looking as good. So I think when you're the head guy, you're making a ton of money. There's really nothing. He's untouchable. Like, you can't fire him. His buyout's $90 million or whatever it is. So I think you have time, but then you have to figure out, what can I do to make this better? And looking at yourself as opposed to, why is it somebody else's fault that we're not winning?
God, that is so interesting. Okay, so not that you're always privy to everything that's going on in Omaha, Nebraska, and Lincoln, and the state as a whole, but it's been some very interesting press conferences as of late, and now it's a new play caller and kind of that transition. From a psyche standpoint, knowing what you know or don't know, would you rather be SC with the quarterback change and answering the questions, or Nebraska if you could gauge the emotional pendulum?
That's a really good question, because both have been to see UCLA go in there, I was very surprised. And UCLA looks pretty good now. I think just because it's a home game for USC, maybe I would rather be there. They played better at home. They had a 14-point lead against Penn State at home. Maybe that's going to be like the spark. But, USC's lost 4 of their last 5. And on the Nebraska side, going 5-1 and then losing 3 in a row, it's like similar situations where you're like, this is the game you need to kind of get right. And USC's helped a bunch of other teams get right. Like Minnesota got their first FBS win in 7 tries, and Maryland got their only Big Ten win. USC sort of helped out. Washington got a important win in Seattle. So it's been that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I guess it just depends on how you come out and play. But USC playing at home, maybe they have a little confidence there, since that's the one place they've been able to actually do okay.
What do you make of the early admission last week on a Tuesday? Maybe transfer portal, but you think that was the primary reason for announcing the quarterback change so early in the bye?
I think USC needed some hope and a spark. We actually broke that story. Our website at uscfootball.com did. And, we had heard some things that they might have wanted to keep it quiet, but he ended up addressing it on Tuesday, like the day after we broke it. But I just think if you're going to tell these families, it's going to get out. So I can't imagine that they really wanted to keep it quiet for 2 weeks. But I think some of it just being the fans were so turned off. And we've seen this a lot during the Clay Helton era, where it goes from anger to apathy. And I don't think you want that, where fans they're just not checked it, and I don't think you see that at Nebraska. People are showing up no matter what. And in LA and USC, if you're just bad, week after week, people will stop showing up and they'll stop caring. And I think this was sort of a way to try to get that spark going. They've been, right or wrong, the fans have been calling to bench Miller Moss for a while. I don't think their offensive problems are all his fault. He's made some bad throws, but they just wanted something different. And I think this was probably a little too late for what some of the fans wanted, but just something to kind of give them a spark to try to get back to scoring a bunch of points. Because that's what they've been, all of Lincoln Riley's tenure, they've been top, I think number 6 in the country in scoring, was the worst he's ever done. So this is a lot worse than that. So I think they just needed something to kind of get a spark going.
Ryan, let's talk just from a football standpoint. Obviously, Maeva has some different skill sets, a little bit more mobile than Miller Moss. What do you expect it to look like on Saturday with that change?
Yeah, when we watched Maeva's tape through his time at UNLV, there was that, extra mobility for sure, but he also threw the ball down the field more than Miller Moss. And I think USC was, top 5 in, yards per attempt, leading, the last couple of years. And then this year, it's dropped off significantly. And for whatever reason, they haven't been able to get the ball down the field like that. And I think Maeva's shown that he can do that. He's made some mistakes too, but, we're seeing mistakes with Miller Moss. So if you can get that extra element of getting the ball down the field for some bigger plays, some bigger chunk plays, and then also, if you have the mesh concept, the zone read kind of things, and the quarterback can keep it every once in a while. I don't think he ever ran for more than 40 yards in a game or something at UNLV, but there's just that extra element of, we could see it happening. And he had a nice run on a scramble play, like a broken play against Utah State when he was in at garbage time and he ran it in for a touchdown. Maybe a little bit of something like that. If he does that, I think the fans will go crazy. Like if he runs in a touchdown in the red zone or something, the fans will be like, see, I told you. But the one thing to watch for, I think, would be getting the ball down the field more. Just for whatever reason, we just didn't see much of that with Miller Moss.
That's Ryan Abraham, covers USC, USCfootball.com, part of 24/7 Sports. Ryan, we appreciate the time and hope you enjoy the game this weekend, but not maybe too much.
We'll see if the weather is good for you.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, Ryan.
All right, thank you.
That's Ryan Abraham from USCfootball.com. That's the show for today. We will be back tomorrow. And if you've got family that's going to be back in town, make sure you get to mhhospitality.net. They will get you taken care of with group rates and everything else. Stay once and carry memories forever. That's mhhospitality.net. That's DB. I'm Ravi. We'll be back tomorrow.